On the past few episodes of 5-Minute Leadership, we have looked at the Siamese twin topics of succession planning and leadership transition. We've looked at them from a theological and biblical perspective, from some stories in Scripture, but also we've borrowed some concepts and ideas and best practices from the corporate world. Just because we use corporate ideas doesn't mean that the exercise itself is not thoroughly spiritual. It is deeply spiritual and important for churches and ministries to do the best we can to master succession planning, to execute a leadership transition that enables the mission and the vision to continue generation after generation. Now, today we want to look at 3 examples from history of leaders and founders who prepared and provided, and some who didn't. I want to look first at the 18th century's 2 greatest spiritual leaders, George Whitefield and John Wesley. Now, they were friends when they were university students at Oxford, but then their ministries kind of went in different directions, theologically, philosophically, and in many ways. George Whitefield was one of the greatest preachers in history. At times, he preached to crowds of over 80,000 in London's Hyde Park. Now, that's in the 1700s. There's no amplification, just his voice. When he came to America, Ben Franklin, who was not a Christian believer, but always went to every chance he had to listen to Whitefield preach, Ben Franklin estimated that the crowd of 30,000 all the way to the back could hear Whitefield clearly. Whitefield preached in almost every town in England, Scotland, and Wales. 7 times he crossed the Atlantic Ocean to preach in America, and it was estimated that over 80% of Americans heard him, obviously live and in person. Over 10 million people heard Whitefield preach in 34 years of preaching. J.C. Ryle wrote this about Whitefield. He obtained a degree of popularity such as no preacher before or since has ever reached. No preacher has ever been so universally popular in every country he visited. No preacher has ever retained a hold on his audience so entirely as he did for 34 years. His popularity never wanted. It was as great in the end of his days as it was in the beginning. Now, his contemporary, John Wesley. John Wesley was a good preacher, but not great like Whitefield. Wesley rode over 250,000 miles on horseback. He preached over 42,000 sermons. He published over 200 books, 23 hymn books, 5,000 tracts, and he gave away the proceeds, the money earned from all of the publishing, to the ministry. He died at 87 years old in 1791, and when he died, there were 500 ordained preachers he had trained, 115,000 Methodist members. But today, hundreds of years later, there are 26 Methodist and Wesleyan denominations in 132 nations with 75 million members. Plus, there are over 600 million Pentecostals, Charismatics, and various holiness denomination members with Wesleyan roots, including every nation. My resident historian's son constantly tells me that he says, "Dad, a lot of every nation leaders claim to be Calvinists, but as an historian, observing discipleship principles and practice and sermons and the way every nation people go about our business, he concludes that we have deep Wesleyan roots." George Whitefield said of Wesley at the end of his life, quote, "My brother Wesley acted more wisely than I. The souls that were awakened under his ministry he joined in small groups and thus preserved the fruit of his labors. This I neglected, and my people are a rope of sand." Here's the basic difference. Whitefield built moments. Wesley built a movement. And boy, did Whitefield build moments. One of the greatest preachers to ever live. Going to one of his rallies, hearing him preach, was quite a moment. Wesley, maybe the moments weren't as great, but he built a movement that is continuing this day to bear fruit all over the world. Yes, the moments are important, but if we want to think 100 years from now, we want to think long term and have gospel impact way beyond our life, we have to build movements. The past few episodes of leadership, what is this thing called? The past few episodes of 5 Minute Leadership has On the past few episodes of 5 Minute Leadership, we have looked at the topics of On the past few episodes of 5 Minute Leadership, we have looked at the Siamese twin topics of leadership transition and no. Oh, gosh. All right.